Production differences between gauges, pressure senders, and pressure regulators can cause a variance in the indicated pressure up to 5 psi. There should be a difference of 1 to 3 psi between the operation of 1 and 2 pumps. After all the initial leak testing is complete, turn off all switches and pull the fuel valve to the off position. You must continue regular inspections of the fuel system for leakage. This is especially important during the first few hours of operation and during each pre-flight inspection. Carefully connect the ECU and the ignition modules. Install the seatback panel and check the security of the wiring. Arm the FADEX system to test for proper reconnection of the components. Turn off all switches and verify that the fuel valve is off. Before starting the helicopter engine for the first time, be sure you have reviewed and performed all procedures relating to preparation of the cooling, oil, and ignition sections in the RI 162F engine manual. It is important that you read the entire engine manual as vital procedures are contained throughout. Each section contains relevant information essential to properly start and operate the power plant. Warning: failure to follow all these procedures may damage the engine. Monitor the RI 162F engine very closely, especially during the first 5 hours of operation. Warning: it is very important to not exceed an idle until the coolant and oil temperatures reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit and the thermostat opens. Oil temperature must also be in the green range on the gauge. If the thermostat is closed and the engine exceeds 3,000 RPM, the pressure in the cooling system could more than double and cause considerable damage. Do not idle the engine for long, extended periods of time. Once the coolant and oil temperature reach the green range on the gauges, the RPM and load should be varied for the most effective run-in. The engine should never be idled for longer than is necessary. On shutdown, idle the engine only long enough to cool down and stabilize the engine components. A water temperature drop of 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit after set down from a hover is adequate for component stabilization. Follow the maintenance requirements closely. Frequent inspections will expose the need for adjustments before problems and damage occur. Individual experiences may also direct you toward additional inspections and adjustments beyond the increments outlined in the engine manual. Warning: do not operate the RI-162F power plant in any rough running condition under load. High frequency vibration or roughness in the engine is readily felt through the pedals in the ship. The initial startup procedure on the engine will require at least 2 people. Each person should have definite responsibilities. A comprehensive review of all procedures and related duties ahead of time will eliminate most of the confusion during the exciting first few minutes of engine operation. As an option, the builder pilot may start the engine the first time without the main rotors installed. Warning: do not exceed idle RPM when starting or operating the engine without the main rotors, even after the engine reaches operating temperature. The tail rotor drive system must be connected and properly tensioned to perform the idle check. The purpose of the idle check is to verify the oil system is operating properly and remove the air from the coolant system without the added dangers of the moving rotors overhead. Propylene glycol is a recommended choice for the coolant antifreeze. Propylene glycol offers improved cavitation corrosion protection and better overall performance than ethylene glycol. It is also necessary to include a compatible supplemental coolant additive, a rust inhibitor water pump lubricant. Reference the engine manual for more information. Rotorway International has tested and recommends a product called Complete, which contains the proper concentrations of propylene glycol and a corrosion inhibitor additive. The best type is the premixed version, which already includes the proper amount of distilled water added. This product is distributed by Fleetguard Incorporated, a Cummins diesel company. Caution: never use water only in the cooling system. Never mix tap water or well water with the antifreeze concentrate. Use only distilled water to mix with the antifreeze solution. Review the Prince construction manual and video to ensure that all cooling system components are attached and routed correctly. Verify that all hoses are secure and that hose clamps are installed past the bead or flare on the end of the joining tube or fitting. All hoses must be protected from the exhaust manifold heat source. The tie down and routing of all hoses must be done in such a way as to prevent chafing damage. Water pump priming and air removal is one aspect of the initial engine startup which requires 2 people. One person, the pilot, must start the engine and monitor all instruments. The other person is needed to bleed air from the system and to check the cooling system for leaks. This person will also be in an excellent position to watch for several other systems for potential problems. Caution: water temperature must be monitored constantly during the entire initial startup procedure. It is an inherent characteristic of the cooling system to repeatedly lose the prime at the water pump during this period, causing the water temperature to increase very rapidly. Complete the following before startup. Open all 3 air bleed valves slightly. The valves are located on the rear corner of the radiator, the water pump, and the elbow on the top of the water jacket, all on the passenger side of the helicopter. Note: install a length of clear plastic hose and clamps on the air bleed valves and use a catch container under all bleed areas to recover as much coolant mixture as possible. Slowly pour the coolant mixture into the surge tank until it flows continuously from the 3 bleed valves. Once a steady stream of coolant without air bubbles is emitted, close the valves. Leave the surge tank cap off at this time. The surge tank must be continuously filled during the idle check. Turn on the instruments and verify that the needle on the water temperature gauge, as well as on the oil temperature gauge, moves from a low temperature setting to a pegged low position. Ensure that enough additional coolant solution has been prepared so that the surge tank can be kept full after the engine is started. Note the 162F's coolant capacity is 2.8 US gallons. Note before proceeding, all other systems must be prepared before starting the engine. Before starting the engine, perform this modified startup checklist. Note, this modified checklist is for the idle check only.
Go through the startup. Make sure the fuel is pumped.
Oil the chain and check the master link. Check that the clutch is disengaged. Turn on the key and the instrument switch. Arm the FADEC system. This will vary from the 2 ECUs that have been produced for the exact 162F. Refer to the flight manual you received from Rotorway. Turn on the fuel valve. Turn on one fuel pump and verify fuel pressure. Turn on both ignition switches. Place the controls in the start position. Set the throttle to 0%. Make sure the other person or persons are clear of the moving parts and tail rotor. The pilot can now start the engine. Oil pressure should rise within 3 to 5 seconds. Engage the clutch. The pilot must monitor the oil pressure, water temperature, and oil temperature. Keep the throttle at 0%. The pilot should check the operation of both ignition systems, both fuel pumps, and both FADEC switches. Then leave all switches on. Turn on the alternator. At the first sign of rapid water temperature increase, open the air bleed valve in the water pump and bleed the system until no air bubbles appear in the coolant. Proper priming of the water pump is evident by warming of the hoses to the water pump as well as a slow increase in water temperature. Caution, do not allow the water temperature to exceed 185 degrees Fahrenheit during the initial startup period. If a rapid and continuous increase in water temperature occurs and cannot be stopped by bleeding at the water pump, the engine must be stopped before the water temperature reaches 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Allow the engine to cool, then bleed out the air at the 3 air bleed valve locations. The thermostat will begin to cycle open and closed when the water temperature reaches approximately 160 degrees Fahrenheit. When this cycling starts, additional air will flow through the system, most of which can be bled out through the radiator valve. The other person must keep the surge tank 1/2 to 3/4 full at all times. After you have determined the system is free of air bubbles, make sure that the surge tank is 1/2 to 3/4 full and install the pressure cap. After approximately 7 minutes of running, the oil temperature should reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Stop the engine by shutting off both fuel pumps. When the engine stops, turn off the fuel valve. Turn off all switches. Disengage the clutch. Check the belt tension on the tail rotor belts and adjust as necessary. Let the engine cool and remove the cap from the surge tank. Caution, the system must be allowed to cool before removing the cap. Removal of the pressure cap when the cooling system is hot can result in severe burns. Open the air bleed valves in the water pump and radiator and allow coolant to bleed for 10 to 15 seconds while keeping the surge tank full. Close the valves, fill the surge tank 1/2 to 3/4 full, and replace the cap. A warm engine restart will display an initial temperature increase, followed by a rapid decrease if correct priming is accomplished. Rebleed the system after each of the first few runs to ensure the complete removal of air. Continue to monitor the water temperature, especially close during the first few hours of operation when problems are most likely to occur. Install the main rotor blades. Refer to section 24. The center of gravity requirement for any helicopter is very important to its safe operation. In order to determine that your rotorway exec 162F has been built correctly and the weight and balance is correct, you will have to perform a static hang test. Refer to the flight manual for proper setup and procedures. Select a test area that allows control of observers in the event that if anything flies off, it will not cause damage or injury. Only essential personnel should be around the helicopter when the engine is running. Brief all personnel that will be approaching the helicopter in operation to always approach from the front quadrant in view of the pilot, and be sure that the pilot is aware of your approach before getting close to the boundary agreed upon. Be aware of the tail rotor dangers when moving around the helicopter for inspections and other tasks. Set the helicopter in an area that the main shaft can be straight up in all directions if possible. This will help when verifying measurements. The helicopter must be tied to the ground for the first run-ups. Reference the construction manual section 26 for the correct tie-down procedures. Oil the chain and check the master link. Start the engine as per normal startup procedures and allow the engine to idle until the temperature is in the green.